There he goes. Woo! Wow!
Although weary-bodied and bleary-eyed after our overnight flight, we were glad to be in Norway. En route to our hotel in Oslo to join our escorted Globus tour, we took in views of some unusual buildings and bridges. Later, while walking through town, we were impressed by the numbers of electric vehicles that not only included cars but also buses. License plates for these EVs naturally begin with the letter E. Oslo has numerous high-powered charging stations as well as wireless charging parking strips to easily accommodate them. Even some ferries are electrically powered. Because the Royal Palace was near our hotel, we walked rather than taking an EV to tour it. A crowd had gathered for the 1:30 changing of the guard. This uniformed guard on duty at the main gate looks ready for some relief. Notice this parader? We'll see her later. Meanwhile, the guard in the booth watches as fellow soldiers march by, looking straight ahead and seeming to ignore him. Hey, where are you going? Isn't one of you my replacement? Shortly, some troop back. There's a huddle at the entrance gate with some indistinct shouting and stamping. Ultimately, the sentry indeed is replaced, and all but the one marches away. Here's that soldier we saw earlier, now being briefly protected from the rain by Barb. Not to worry, she was not at all distracted from her royal duty. Next up is a walk in the rain through Princess Ingrid Alexander's sculpture garden, which was based on designs by Norwegian 5th and 6th graders. It's got some imaginative shapes, such as this fanciful instrument.
And this looks like something from Picasso.
But maybe it isn't. It's called Mittmot. In Norwegian, that means my courage or bravery. Continuing on is this twisted pencil, plus this blocky arrangement. A giant rabbit's head, followed by this tree growing out of the palm of a hand. So that's what a palm tree looks like. Then a wormy serpent, parts of which have been shined, perhaps for good luck. What about this legs and mouth creature? Seems to need a little dental work. As this one seems to bid farewell, we do the same and move onward. Floating in the Oslo Fjord and reflecting the powers of the sea, wind, and tides is an immense glass and stainless steel kinetic sculpture of a mass of ice. It's called She Lies. Adjacent to She Lies is the Oslo Opera House, enveloped in a vast, sloping white granite and marble walkable roof. Visitors enjoy a commanding view of the city, the harbor, and the surrounding mountainous landscape. On the harbor's wharf, people can rent wood-burning saunas and go for cooling dips in the fjord. Near the harbor is a treasure trove of Norwegian and other artwork, architecture, and design at the National Museum. One of the stars of its collection is Edvard Munch's famous painting, The Scream. We and other visitors can't resist imitating it. Already famous at the age of 31, Munch painted this piercing-eyed self-portrait veiled with rising cigarette smoke. And here he is in 1919, suffering from the Spanish flu during that pandemic. Maybe he was feeling the same way as in The Scream? Further drawing our attention is this colossal grass skirt by Simone Lee. The museum has a gallery with works by Gustav Vigeland, the famous Norwegian sculptor. Here's one of his bronze friezes, reminiscent of works by Rodin, under whom he studied. Vigeland's magnum opus is located at Frogner Park, a sprawling urban sculpture garden. This park includes the towering monolith, 121 intertwined human figures representing different ages have been carved out of a single block of granite. Below, on the monolith plateau, are dozens of jumbo-sized nude sculptures depicting various stages and emotions of life. Vigeland purposely did not label them, leaving the interpretations up to the observer's imaginations. This person fights a dragon. But what provoked the combat? Who's winning? Another seems happily victorious. But why? This one is trapped in a ring, maybe trying to break free. Others are contorted into wrestling or similar positions, or just staring out their armpits. Then there's the angry boy. Is he upset because he's jealous of the rest of his siblings having fun getting horseback rides from Mom? Back on the wharf, Jim has found a shiny chrome diver contemplating Oslo's fjord. At what is the diver gazing? He'll make quite a splash if he jumps in. In our hotel room, we're amused by the tiny and cramped shower stall enclosed by a plastic quarter-circle door. Nevertheless, we have to hand it to the hotel for their expansive buffet. Its delicious breakfast offerings fire us up for the day, complete with that unique, sweet Norwegian brown goat cheese. Continuing with the nude statue's theme is this happy porcine bench warmer outside of a restaurant that only serves pork. But why would she be smiling in such a place? On the wharf next to an ice cream stand is this young sleeping gal, apparently undisturbed by the passers-by. Hope she used sunscreen. Oslo City Hall is also festooned with plenty of statues and other fine art. Among them is this one of Halvard, patron saint of Oslo. As the story goes, Halvard was trying to protect a pregnant slave who was accused of theft, yet he believed she was innocent. They try to escape her accusers in a boat, but are pursued. Their tormentors kill Halvard, shooting him with 3 arrows, then kill the woman. In an effort to cover up the murder, they try to sink Halvard's body in a fjord by hanging a millstone on him. But the body will not stay under the water. When their crime is discovered, Hallvard is martyred. One interpretation of all of this is compassion in the face of injustice. In contrast, this grimacing warrior is Harald Hardrada, also known as Harald the Hard or Harald the Ruthless. He may have been one of the last of the Viking kings. Enough of death and menace. Around City Hall is a series of beautifully blooming and trimmed gardens. Perched over City Hall's entrance is the waving statue of the Golden Oslo girl. She overlooks the Swan Fountain, around which a number of seabirds gracefully fly. The entrance arcade has several bas-reliefs depicting scenes from Norse mythology and poems. Once inside, you are surrounded by the immense central hall, also the site of Nobel Peace Prize ceremonies. This hall is completely covered with murals and other artwork that blend in beautifully with the marble floor. Inside the Grand Banquet Hall hang paintings of Norwegian royalty. Covering the back is a mural of Oslo residents enjoying a summer's day al fresco. After it was nearly completed, however, the artist had to rearrange his painting to accommodate doors installed in the wall, which supposedly is why this boy is pointing to the doors while sticking out his tongue. Yet another angry boy. Jim takes a long look at the wood-paneled City Hall's council chamber. Among the symbols on the speaker's chair is another depiction of Hallvard with the 3 arrows. It's time for some fun. Outside the City Hall on the plaza, drummers bang away, and this bubble blower teases and enchants children and adults alike with his gigantic, short-lived floating creations. Nearby is a statue of a modern Norwegian king, Olaf, who looks on while children merrily frolic on a spider web play set. More city impressions, from those kids at play to these seabirds in a feeding frenzy on the wharf. Our next stop is the Fram Museum, which memorializes expeditions by famous Norwegians. Fram appropriately means forward. It was the name of one of the vessels that was used extensively for exploration and scientific research between 1893 and 1912. The mighty ship is in full view and open to museum visitors. Hilda, our city guide, explains what some of these expeditions were like and their goals. Among them were attempts to find the North Pole and the successful voyage by Roald Amundsen to first navigate the Northwest Passage. The expeditions each took 3 or more years, including purposely getting trapped in the ice. In this animation, you can see the windmill spinning on the Fram. It generated electricity for the ship's lights during the windy, frigid, long darkness of polar winter. Once aboard, we get to see and imagine close up what life would have been like in its cramped confines. Here are its engine room, work and living areas. Next, a peek at the tight sleeping quarters, a game table, and containers of food in the galley. One expedition tale is that, as fuel was running low to melt ice for water needed for cooking pancakes, polar bear blood was substituted. Yum? Across from the Fram is the Kon-Tiki Museum. It showcases Thor Heyerdahl's famous balsa wood raft that he floated on to cross the Pacific in 1947, intent on learning how ancient Polynesians might have navigated such oceanic vastness. The original Kon-Tiki is exhibited, as is the Ra too. Constructed from papyrus reeds, Heddal used Ra to cross the Atlantic from Morocco to Barbados. This time, he was trying to prove that early North African cultures may have influenced those in the Americas. Other Heddal memorabilia is displayed here too. The gift shop even offers one of his free wanderlust sayings on refrigerator magnets. Oslo truly was impressive. Now it's time to head north and visit another Norwegian treasure, 3 of the few surviving stave churches constructed during the Middle Ages. Staves are corner posts that support the structures. Many of these wooden churches were built by descendants of Vikings using techniques employed by their ancestors in constructing their long ships. Only 28 of the original 1,300 churches remain. The largest is at Heddal and dates to the 13th century. Christian and Norse religious motifs blend together. Notice the gargoyle-like dog carvings on the top of these roofs? The bells in the stout wooden tower vigorously peal, summoning the faithful. Inside, a guide relates the building's details and history.
They believed that evil spirits were coming from the north, so they had to protect themselves. That's also why the women had to sit on the north side, because as the men were stronger in the physical world, they believed that women were stronger in the spiritual world and were more equipped to handle those evil spirits and could protect themselves from those. They took down the tapestry, but as you can see, there's been some condensation underneath it, which is why half the wall lack of painting.
Some of the wood carvings were intended to scare away evil spirits. Others have more mysterious meanings. All are exquisite works of art. Above the crucifix at the altar is one of the many carved masks. It's impossible not to keep glancing up at this incredible interior architecture. The floral paintings on the walls of the nave date from the 17th century. Amazingly, the church remains fully intact and in use from April to October. The organist prepares for an upcoming wedding. The town of Lillehammer has its own stave church. We didn't get a chance to go inside of it, though. At Lillehammer's Maihaugen Outdoor Museum is a reconstruction of the original Garmo stave church.
The stave church is built on staves, so you can here see 8 big staves.
What's a stave? Oh.
Here, those big like pillars.
Oh, that's a stave, right.
Yes, so
As a guide
they hold up
explains the construction, we glance at the ornamentation, including this hanging ship model. That's not what you usually see in a church. In Voss, this stone church stands in contrast to stave churches. It was built on the site of an 11th century wooden church. Voss also has a memorial to one of its famous sons, Knut Rockne, the Notre Dame football coach of the early 20th century. Next, we briefly stop over in Bergen. Bergen is Norway's second largest city, possibly first settled around 1020. The Rosenkrantz Tower dates to the 1270s and served as both a residence and a fortification against frequent attacks. Bergen, the older part of town, grew to prominence as a trading center for dried cod. But there's much more to it. Its center has a memorial to composer Edvard Grieg, who was born here. Also, there's a massive concert hall, the outside of which you'll see later. More statuary and floral gardens surround the city pond. Many of Bergen's old buildings have overhanging upper floors. Fortunately, this outhouse isn't one of them. A number of the structures are being renovated per strict guidelines on the kinds of materials and techniques allowed. Some of the stores have noticeably sloping floors and crooked doors that still manage to close. Walking the narrow wooden-walled alleys of Bergen feels as if we've been transported back in time. We eat at a very well-preserved old restaurant, also with a tilt to the flooring. The L-beams are authentic. Oivind explains his strengths.
New, what is replaced, and what is old. The old didn't crack.
The food and wine pair well with the surroundings. Bergen typically gets 85 inches of rain in a year. This raincoat's designer takes pride in that. Our visit copiously soaks it up. We did, however, have mostly clear skies when we rode the Mount Floyen funicular. It's worth the steep walk up to the ticket office for the ride to view the sprawling city and its harbor. Plus these grazing goats, unbothered by the onlookers. From this lofty 1,050-foot-high bird's-eye view, the attractions we see below take on a fascinating perspective. One of us asks to have the piano building, a.k.a. the concert hall, pointed out.
Right there, so there's the lake.
Yeah.
And right,
Oh, yeah.
right there, you can see.
Sure, we're happy to oblige. And there they are, both the lake and the grand piano-shaped hall. Guess what's playing there? Grieg's Peer Gynt. We happily get a group photo taken around the friendly mountaintop troll. Time to roll back down. It's a fun 6-minute-long journey, and the kids in our car love it. Next up is a visit to some of the fabulous fjords and waterfalls. As previously mentioned, this part of the world gets a lot of rain. So where does all that water flow? Much is diverted to hydroelectric plants, which provide over 90% of Norway's electrical needs. The EV owners must be grateful. The rest wildly flows into the abundant, spectacularly scenic waterfalls, mixing with the seawater that joins the long, deep coastal fjords throughout the country. Here's a sampling of them. There are stepped waterfalls that drop from tier to tier, waterfalls that fan out, and zigzagging, thinly sinuous falls that nearly cross over each other.
That's very cool. That's our way back. Yeah.
For 12 miles each way, the Fram Railway takes us past a number of these beauties. On the ride, the narrator spins an amusing yarn that's acted out at the next stop.
Through the ages, many people claim to have seen strange sights and creatures of legend in the Floyen Valley. Among them, you find Huldre. Stunningly beautiful Huldre may tempt you with her spellbinding song and lure you into the mountain.
That was fun. Now let's sail on a fjord to Geiranger. First, try to spot these daring rock climbers on the steep cliff. Next, check out the Seven Sisters Waterfalls. These falls cascade from heights of as much as 820 feet. According to the legend, these sisters perform their eternal aquatic dance, hair flowing down. Across the fjord is the solitary Suder waterfall, a figurative man who endlessly and fruitlessly flirts with them, but is constantly rejected. Despondent, he has turned to drink for solace. Supposedly, this waterfall is in the shape of a bottle. Can you see it? How about those roaring twin falls as a roadside attraction? Back to Fram for more cataracts of the desirable and dazzling kind. Oivind, our tour guide, excitedly points them out. Our heads rapidly swivel around as we strive to see all of them.
They're really long.
So soon we will have a nice rapid dance from the right. See there?
Yeah. But the zoom changed.
Down, we'll go also to the right. To the right, to the right, to the right.
Look down below.
The other right.
A ferry ride on a glass-like fjord is just so peaceful and immersive. Several of our tour days found wind so calm and waters so still that the surrounding mirrored mountains made it hard to tell which way was up. The Stalheim Hotel itself is a museum in its own right. The lobby is adorned with a wondrous collection of wood carvings, antique furniture, weaponry, funny masks, an ornate 8-string hardanger fiddle, and other pieces. But we were not prepared for the evening display of vivid lupine and layers of clouds interwoven around the mountains. That amazingly picturesque scene drew many out of the lobby to marvel in awe and enthusiastically take photos. As is the case with so many others in the world, Norway's glaciers are receding. Nonetheless, they remain impressive on this summer's afternoon. Nearly as impressive is the architecture of the Norwegian Glacier Museum and its highly educational and inspiring contents on glaciers, ranging from their formation, effects of climate change, to how they shaped fjords. Even 5,300-year-old Otzi, a model of a man whose mummified remains were discovered in an alpine glacier, inquisitively gazes across the ages at us. Our tour guide has a little fun with one of the exhibits.
Now we have toll everywhere you drive around in the city.
Norway's roads are peppered with tunnels. Ride along with us as our bus driver negotiates what is currently the longest tunnel in the world, nearly 15 1/3 miles. Heddal Tunnel was created to shorten and ease the trip between Oslo and Bergen by eliminating the use of ferries and avoiding lots of winter driving hazards. No, this isn't meant to be a psychedelic trip. The changing colored lights are part of the many safety features installed here. They are designed to break up the monotony of the drive and help allay claustrophobia along the narrow lanes. Besides which, the artistic light show sure is entertaining. Can you see the forest for the trees? Or in this case, the roofs for the ground? All over Norway, we find buildings adorned with turf and birch bark covered roofs. It's another Viking-introduced ecological tradition. By keeping snowmelt and rainwater out, the practical Scandinavians used this technique to extend the life of the wooden boards beneath the turf for as much as 40 years. Better insulation of the interior spaces is yet another advantage. Vemork's former hydroelectric power plant was the site of a dramatic sabotage in World War II. In Nazi-occupied Norway, the plant was being used to make concentrated deuterium oxide, or heavy water. It was intended to be used in fabricating a Nazi nuclear weapon. Our guide explains the process.
Hydrogen comes in different forms, so-called isotopes. There's a form of hydrogen that has an extra neutron in the atomic nucleus. And that means that this form of hydrogen becomes heavier than normal hydrogen. We call it deuterium. And because naturally, it can go into connections with oxygen and make water molecules. But since the hydrogen is heavier, this form of water also becomes heavier. Everything is so well situated to start a little test production down in the basement of the hydrogen factory to start producing highly concentrated heavy water.
With supplies from the Allies in London, the Norwegian saboteurs daringly tried several times. Ultimately, they succeeded, severely damaging the plant and its inventory of heavy water, enough for the Nazis to abandon that ominous project. The basement exhibit effectively recreates the explosive moment of destruction. Shining in the sun outside of the plant is a plaque honoring the patriotic saboteurs. At the start of this video, we saw champion Nordic combined skier Simon Tiller thrilling us with a high-speed practice ski jump at Lillehammer's Olympic Park.
In the flight I was 110, I guess.
But there's more to Lillehammer than the Olympics. The outdoor Maihaugen Museum brings together much of Norway's history in a living exhibit. Dressed in period clothing, our enthusiastic docent tells us about the recreated farmhouse and the practices of its 19th century inhabitants.
Maihaugen then decided opened as a museum in 1904, and all the wooden houses that you'll see today here in this part of town is houses that he saw when he was still alive. Here we're in a very rich farm, a big one. Most farms had around 15 buildings, and this one has 27. So it means it was a massive farm for the time.
The farmer has the seat of privilege in the main house. One of us is happily selected for that role.
the only one at the end of the table. And more importantly, there's a secret stash here that we can't open today, but it would have alcohol bottles here. He's the only one that can open it and serve it to people he thinks deserve. Cool. Strict. She needs to make sure she has 3 years worth of food to feed everyone at all times, human and animal included. So that's why we have so many houses to store food. Moeder. Better. Konge. Farver.
Here's how it was in school back in the day. That includes disciplinary tactics, such as being forced to stand in the corners of shame.
Girls, and be here all day. And for you girls, it would be the same, but in front of the boys. So here.
We even have a lesson on Norwegian language.
You have to have 2 O's to do book, schools, and every other things. Here, O is just an O in Norwegian. So to be able to make the sound O, they needed to add a letter. And this is the A with that little mini O on top of it, basically. Yeah. O. There you say tusen takk. 1,000 thank yous. Tusen takk. Tusen takk for listening to me. And now I'm going to take you back to the main building.
The exhibit of Norwegian folk art and a dance video at the main building is fascinating. Trolls are prominent in Norwegian folklore. Tour director Oivind talks about the legendary long-nosed mythical creatures.
Trolls, what shall I say? We had 2 guys in Norway. Asbjørnsen was the name of one. The other one was Bo. They traveled around Norway collecting troll stories. And you know, some say to the kids that if you don't eat your food, the trolls will come and eat you. But I never got that story. But you know, a lot of these fairy tale troll stories were brought out from Norway with the immigrants, and I think almost everywhere in the world they have heard about the Norwegian trolls. 3 Billion Whiskers, is that familiar? Or 3 Billy Goat Gruff?
Yes.
You see. Where did they live?
Under a bridge.
Under the bridge, right? They also say that trolls, they cannot be out when it's sunny. If they're out when it's sunny, then they will turn into a piece of rock. That's why it's so rocky in Norway. Nevertheless, my favorite troll story as a kid was about Askeladden. Askeladden means the boy who played with the ashes in the fireplace. And he had 2 older brothers. His 2 older brothers always thought that this boy was useless and that they were so much better than this little brother. Little Askeladden, he always proved different. And you know, growing up with a sister that was 10 years older than me, I could relate to him in a way, you know?
Let's take one more ride, this time on the Loen skylift high over the fjord. We rise into the thick fog at the summit and think, who'd want to glide into this pea soup? We can barely see the grazing sheep with their neck bells clanging. Well, despite the weather, one of our tour mates bravely rides the zip line and loves it.
100% glad I did it.
There are daring paragliders, summoning the nerve to leap into the translucent sky. Best of luck to you! After some rational hesitancy, they dash madly and blindly over the cliff. Talk about a leap of faith. Smooth sailing, friends! Theirs and our reward comes as they descend into the clarity and beauty of the valley below. Our Oslo guide Hilda serenades. As we glide to the end of our travel, we reflect on how much we enjoyed and learned. Excitement, history, culture, art, scenery, and just plain fun made for a splendid time in Norway. Not to mention the good apple cider, wine, beer, and food consumed along the way. This talented piano player made our lavish buffet experience at the Loen Alexandra Hotel all the more relaxing. Skål to it all! Farewell, Norway, until we visit again. For now, it's bags out so we can move on to another adventure.